The world believes some souls are born broken, their very essence a whisper when others roar. To be an omega, and voiceless, was to be a ghost in a society that valued strength and sound. I was a shadow, my existence acknowledged only by the pity in their eyes, a pity that felt colder than any disdain. My silence was a cage, built not of bars but of unspoken words, of dreams that fluttered like trapped birds against the glass of my heart. They said I was a burden, a defect, a silent testament to my pack's misfortune. But sometimes, in the deepest quiet of night, I wondered if perhaps my silence held a power they couldn't comprehend, a depth they simply chose not to see. It was a foolish thought, a fragile hope, yet it was all I had to cling to in a life devoid of sound and acceptance. My fingers traced the rough, splintered wood of the window frame, the chill seeping into my fingertips a familiar comfort. Outside, the pack bustled, their boisterous laughter and sharp commands echoing through the crisp morning air. I watched, as I always did, a silent observer of a life I could never truly join. My sister Lyra, a vibrant beta with a voice that could charm birds from trees, moved gracefully among them, her presence a stark contrast to my own. She was everything I was not: loud, confident, loved. Our mother, a stern alpha, often reminded me of my deficiencies, her words like sharp stones thrown into a still pond. A silent omega is a useless omega, she'd often say, her gaze hardening with a mixture of shame and resignation. My father, a kind but distant man, offered only fleeting, sorrowful glances, unable to bridge the chasm my silence had created. My heart ached, a constant throb of loneliness, yet I knew no other way to exist. My world was small, confined to the meager cottage rooms and the quiet corners of the packlands where I could disappear without notice. I spent my days tending a small, neglected garden, the vibrant colors of the flowers a defiant splash against the muted tones of my life. They didn't care that I couldn't speak. They simply bloomed, offering their silent beauty without judgment. This morning, however, the familiar rhythm of my quiet existence was shattered by a sudden, urgent clamor. A messenger, his face pale and streaked with dust, galloped into the village square, his voice hoarse as he cried out the news. The Alpha King was coming. The Alpha King, a figure of legend and fear, known for his absolute power and his ruthless pursuit of order. A shiver, not entirely of fear, but of an unfamiliar anticipation ran through me. The pack erupted into a frenzy of activity, a whirlwind of preparations for the king's arrival. The air crackled with nervous energy, excitement, and a palpable dread. Whispers of the king's reputation, his stern demeanor, and his unyielding justice flew through the village. He was a force of nature, they said, a ruler who tolerated no weakness, no deviation from his ironclad laws. What would he make of a voiceless omega? My mother, her face a mask of anxiety, immediately set about ensuring every detail of our humble home was impeccable. My sister Lyra preened, her beta scent blossoming with a hopeful eagerness. She saw an opportunity, a chance to impress the king, perhaps even to be chosen as a mate. I, of course, was relegated to the shadows, instructed to remain out of sight, lest my presence somehow offend the powerful Alpha. "Do not shame us, Ilara," my mother warned, her voice low and sharp, her eyes darting to my silent form. "Stay in your room, do not utter a sound." The irony was not lost on me. I nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, my internal monologue a torrent of unheard protests. Shame? Is my existence itself a shame? The garden became my sanctuary, the rich earth cool beneath my bare feet. I busied myself with pruning the overgrown roses, their thorns a familiar bite against my skin. Each snip of the shears was a silent act of defiance, a small assertion of control in a life utterly devoid of it. The scent of damp soil and blooming petals filled my senses, grounding me amidst the rising tide of fear and expectation. I watched the pack members scurrying like ants, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and terror. The king's arrival was not merely a visit, it was an inspection, a judgment. And I, the silent, flawed Omega, was the most likely to be found wanting. Yet, a strange curiosity bloomed within me, a tiny, rebellious flower. I had heard tales of the king, of his piercing gaze that could see into the very soul, of his uncanny ability to discern truth from deception. Would he see me? Would he see the girl beneath the silence, the heart that beat with a fierce, untamed rhythm? Or would I remain invisible, a ghost even to the most powerful alpha in the land? The hours crawled by, each moment stretching into an eternity. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, dramatic shadows across the village. The air grew heavy with anticipation, a thick, almost tangible tension. Then, a distant rumble, a low thrum that vibrated through the very ground. It grew steadily louder, a primal sound that stirred something deep within my Omega core. The king was here. The king arrived not with a procession of trumpets and banners, but with a silent, imposing majesty that commanded immediate attention. His retinue was small, a handful of elite guards, their faces unreadable, their movements precise. But it was the king himself who drew every eye, every breath. He was a figure carved from legend, his height imposing, his shoulders broad beneath a cloak as dark as a moonless night. His hair, raven black, framed a face that was both starkly handsome and utterly unyielding. His eyes, the color of molten gold, swept over the assembled pack, a gaze that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone, stripping away pretense. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as he dismounted, his movements fluid, powerful. He was an alpha in every sense of the word, his presence radiating an aura of absolute dominance that made even the strongest betas instinctively lower their heads. My mother, usually so composed, trembled visibly beside me, her hand gripping my arm with surprising force. Lyra, usually so confident, seemed to shrink, her eager smile replaced by a nervous flutter. I, hidden mostly behind my mother's broader frame, felt a strange detachment. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs, but my mind remained eerily calm. I watched him, absorbing every detail, every nuance of his powerful presence. He moved with a predatory grace, his gaze lingering on individual pack members, assessing, judging. His silence was as potent as his presence, a heavy, expectant quiet that made the pack hold its collective breath. He began his inspection, moving slowly through the village square, his eyes missing nothing. He spoke little, his commands delivered in a low, resonant voice that carried surprising weight. His questions were direct, his observations sharp. The pack leaders stammered, their usual bravado faltering under his intense scrutiny. My mother pushed me further back, a silent plea in her eyes for me to remain unseen, unheard. I understood. My silence, my perceived weakness, would only invite his disdain. He approached our cottage, his steps deliberate, unhurried. My mother curtsied deeply, Lyra mirroring her movements with a practiced grace. I remained stiff, my gaze fixed on the ground, my head bowed. I could feel his eyes on us, a heavy pressure that prickled my skin. Alpha, my mother's voice was a strained whisper. We are honored by your presence. The king said nothing for a long moment, his golden eyes sweeping over our small family. He looked at Lyra, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. Then his eyes settled on me. I felt the intensity of it, a burning focus that seemed to strip away my carefully constructed invisibility. My breath caught in my throat. He took a step closer, then another, until he stood directly before me. His scent, a powerful blend of pine and ancient earth, filled my senses, overwhelming me. It was the scent of an alpha, but deeper, richer, more profound than any I had ever encountered. It was the scent of a king. And who is this? His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low rumble, surprisingly gentle, yet imbued with an authority that brooked no argument. My mother stiffened, her hand tightening on my arm. My youngest daughter, Ilara, Alpha, she managed, her voice barely audible. She is shy. A lie, a pathetic attempt to mask my voicelessness. The king's golden eyes remained fixed on me, unwavering. He knelt, slowly until his eyes were level with mine. My heart hammered, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the sheer power of his presence. His gaze was not one of pity, nor of disdain, but of something else entirely. Curiosity? Recognition? I couldn't tell. He reached out a hand, his fingers long and strong, and gently lifted my chin. My eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and a strange, burgeoning hope, met his. There was no judgment in his gaze, only an intense, almost sorrowful understanding. She does not speak, he stated, not as a question, but as a pronouncement, his voice a quiet murmur that seemed to fill the entire square. My mother gasped, a small choked sound. Lyra looked away, her face flushing with embarrassment. But I felt a strange liberation. He saw me. He acknowledged my silence, not as a flaw, but as a fact. Her silence speaks loudest, he continued, his thumb gently caressing my cheek. It speaks of a spirit untamed, a voice unheard. His words were a balm to my wounded soul, a recognition I had never dared to dream of. My eyes welled with unshed tears, a silent testament to the raw emotion his unexpected kindness had unleashed. He stood slowly, his gaze still holding mine. She will come with me. The king's pronouncement hung in the air, a shockwave that silenced the entire village. My mother gasped, her face draining of color, while Lyra stared, her mouth agape. Alpha, with all due respect, Ilara is an Omega, my mother stammered, her voice trembling. She is not fit for your court. She couldn't bring herself to say mate. The king's golden eyes narrowed, a subtle shift that sent a ripple of fear through the onlookers. I decide who is fit for my court, he stated, his voice now edged with a steel that left no room for argument. Her silence is not a weakness. It is a mystery I intend to unravel. He turned his gaze back to me, and for a fleeting moment I saw something akin to longing in his eyes, a depth that startled me. He was not merely taking me, he was choosing me, the voiceless Omega, the one everyone had dismissed. A whirlwind of emotions assailed me, fear, confusion, a burgeoning sense of wonder, and a tiny, fragile spark of hope. Was this real? Was I truly being taken from my life of shadows into the light of the king's presence? My mother, defeated, could only nod, her shoulders slumping in resignation. Lyra, still stunned, watched with a mixture of envy and bewilderment. I felt a strange sense of both terror and exhilaration. My life, as I knew it, was over. A new one, terrifying and unknown, was about to begin. The king offered me his hand, his touch warm and firm. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then placed my small hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, a silent promise of protection, of a future I could not yet comprehend. We walked away from the cottage, away from the familiar faces of my pack, away from the life of silence and neglect. I looked back once, seeing my mother's distraught face, Lyra's bewildered expression, and the curious, awestruck gazes of the villagers. Then I turned my face forward, towards the unknown. The king led me to his magnificent black stallion, its coat gleaming like polished obsidian in the fading light. He helped me mount, his hands strong and gentle, then swung himself up behind me. His body was a warm, powerful presence against my back, his scent enveloping me completely. As we rode away, the village lights receding into the distance, I felt a profound shift within me. The cage of my silence still existed, but for the first time it felt less like a prison and more like a sanctuary. A place where only the king, it seemed, was willing to enter. The journey to the king's castle was a blur of sensory overload. The sheer speed of the horses, the wind whipping through my hair, the unfamiliar landscapes rushing past. It was all a stark contrast to the quiet monotony of my former life. The king, whose name I learned was Kalin, rode with a silent intensity, his presence a constant, comforting anchor. He spoke little, but his occasional glances back at me, his subtle adjustments to ensure my comfort conveyed a silent attentiveness that eased my apprehension. My internal thoughts were a chaotic symphony of questions and observations. Why me? What does he want? Is this a dream? I had never been outside my packlands, never seen anything beyond the familiar forests and meadows. Now, towering mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow, and vast, sprawling plains stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a world far grander, far more beautiful than I had ever imagined. Kalen's guards, grim-faced and silent, rode ahead and behind us, their watchful eyes scanning the perimeter. There was a sense of purpose, of unwavering protection, that surrounded the king. I felt safe, enveloped in a bubble of his formidable power. As night fell, the air grew colder, and Kalen, without a word, drew his heavy cloak more tightly around us, sharing its warmth. His strong arm wrapped around my waist, holding me securely against him. The intimacy of it was startling, yet not unwelcome. My body, accustomed to solitude, found a strange comfort in his proximity. His scent, the powerful aroma of pine and ancient earth, filled my lungs, a scent that was rapidly becoming synonymous with safety, with acceptance. We made camp by a roaring fire, the flames casting dancing shadows against the trees. Kalen personally ensured I was fed, offering me dried meat and sweet berries from his own provisions. He watched me eat, his golden eyes thoughtful, assessing. He didn't press me to speak, didn't try to elicit a sound. He simply observed, a silent understanding passing between us. It was a novel experience, to be seen without being judged, to be cared for without expectation. As I lay wrapped in a thick blanket by the fire, listening to the crackle of the flames and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, I found myself studying Kalen. He sat a little apart, his gaze fixed on the dancing fire, his face etched with a quiet intensity. He was a king, a warrior, a figure of immense power, yet there was a vulnerability in his stillness, a hint of solitude that mirrored my own. I wondered what burdens he carried, what thoughts occupied his silent moments. He was a mystery, as much as I was to him. The journey stretched for days, each one reinforcing the growing connection between us. We communicated not with words, but with glances, with shared silences, with subtle gestures. He understood my needs before I could even express them. He pointed out constellations in the night sky, his finger tracing patterns only I could see. He showed me rare wildflowers growing by the roadside, his smile, when it came, a rare and breathtaking sight. I found myself drawn to him, not just by his power, but by his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness. He saw past my voicelessness, past the Omega label, to something deeper, something he seemed to recognize within himself. My heart, once a guarded fortress, began to open, slowly, hesitantly, like a flower turning towards the sun. The king's castle rose from the earth like a jagged crown, its dark stone walls reaching towards the sky, hinting at centuries of history and power. It was a formidable fortress, yet as we approached, I noticed intricate carvings on its facade, delicate windows, and banners bearing a stylized wolf crest that fluttered in the breeze. It was a place of both strength and subtle beauty. The castle gates, massive and iron-bound, swung open silently as we approached, revealing a bustling courtyard filled with guards, servants, and various pack members. A hush fell over the crowd as Kalen dismounted, his presence commanding immediate respect. He helped me down, his hand lingering at my waist for a moment longer than necessary, a small gesture that sent a jolt through me. The castle interior was a labyrinth of echoing halls, grand archways, and vast chambers. Tapestries depicting epic battles and ancient legends adorned the walls, and suits of armor stood sentinel in shadowed alcoves. The air smelled of old stone, polished wood, and something else. A faint, sweet scent of burning incense. It was overwhelming, magnificent, and utterly alien. Servants, their faces deferential, bowed low as we passed. Their gazes, however, were not always so respectful. I caught whispers, glances, and a palpable curiosity directed my way. Who is she? The silent Omega? I felt the familiar burn of shame, the weight of their judgment. But then Kalen's hand, a reassuring presence, found mine. His touch was a silent shield, a reminder that I was under his protection. He led me through a series of increasingly opulent rooms until we reached a chamber bathed in soft, warm light from a massive fireplace. It was a private sitting room, cozy yet elegant, with plush furs scattered over stone benches and intricate carvings adorning the ceiling. "This will be yours," he communicated, his words a low murmur, his golden eyes searching mine for any sign of discomfort. He gestured around the room, indicating a smaller, adjoining bedchamber. "You will have privacy, and anything you require." I looked at him, my heart swelling with an emotion I couldn't name. It was more than gratitude. It was a profound sense of being seen, of being valued. He was offering me not just a place to stay, but a sanctuary, a haven. He paused at the doorway, his gaze lingering. "Rest, Ilara," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "We will speak tomorrow." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the luxurious chamber, the silence now a comforting presence rather than a stifling weight. I explored the rooms, running my fingers over the silken drapes, the soft furs, the intricately carved wooden furniture. A large, comfortable bed, piled high with soft blankets and pillows, beckoned. I had never known such comfort, such luxury. It felt unreal, like a dream from which I would surely awaken. I found a small, ornate desk by the window, and on it, a single crimson rose in a delicate vase. Its petals were soft and velvety, its scent sweet and intoxicating. It was a silent gift, a gesture of thoughtful kindness that spoke volumes. I held it to my nose, inhaling its fragrance, a quiet smile gracing my lips. This was a new beginning, a chapter of my life I could never have imagined. The Alpha King, a man of legend, had seen past my silence, past my perceived flaws, and offered me a place in his world. And for the first time, in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a whisper of possibility. The next morning, I awoke to the gentle sounds of the castle stirring. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A servant, a kind-faced beta woman, brought me a tray laden with warm bread, fresh fruit, and fragrant tea. She smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes, and silently indicated the bathing chamber. The bath was a revelation. Warm, scented water, soft sponges, and fragrant oils. I had never experienced such indulgence. As I bathed, the lingering dirt and weariness of the journey washed away, replaced by a sense of renewal. I emerged feeling lighter, cleaner, and strangely more confident. The servant laid out a selection of gowns for me, fabrics softer than anything I had ever worn, in rich, jewel tones that brought out the color of my eyes. I chose a dress of deep emerald green, its soft folds clinging gently to my form. As I dressed, I caught a glimpse of myself in a polished silver mirror. The girl who stared back was no longer the silent, withdrawn Omega from the village. Her eyes held a new spark, her posture a subtle defiance. The king was waiting for me in a grand study, its walls lined with ancient scrolls and leather-bound books. He stood by a large window, gazing out at the sprawling castle grounds, his back to me. When I entered, he turned, his golden eyes sweeping over me, a slow, approving gaze that made my cheeks flush. "Alara?" he acknowledged, his voice a quiet murmur. He gestured to a plush armchair opposite his own. "Please, sit." I did. My hands clasped nervously in my lap. The silence between us was different now, not heavy with unspoken judgment, but filled with a comfortable anticipation. He sat opposite me, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "I understand your gift, Alara," he began, his voice low and steady. "Your silence is not a curse, but a profound stillness, a canvas upon which the world paints its truths." I looked at him, surprised by his words. No one had ever framed my silence in such a way. He continued, his gaze unwavering. "I have heard many voices in my life, Alara, many words, often empty, often false, but in your silence I sense a depth, a wisdom that words cannot convey." He paused, his gaze softening. "Tell me, in your own way, what you see, what you feel." He placed a small, intricately carved wooden tablet and a stylus on the table between us. "If you wish to communicate, use these." My eyes widened. He was offering me a way to be heard, without forcing me to speak. It was a gesture of profound respect, of understanding. My heart swelled, a silent, joyous cry. I picked up the stylus, my fingers trembling slightly, and etched a single word onto the tablet: hope. Kalen smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his stern features. "Hope," he repeated, his voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. "A powerful word, Alara, and a fitting one." He leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. "I believe you have a purpose here, Alara, a role to play, beyond what you have known." He rose and walked to a large map spread across a table in the corner of the room. "My kingdom faces challenges, whispers of unrest, of dissent, grow louder. My advisors are skilled, but sometimes a fresh perspective, an unfiltered truth, is needed." He turned back to me, his golden eyes intense. "I believe your unique perspective, your ability to observe without the clutter of words, will be invaluable." He wasn't asking me to be a queen or a mate, not yet. He was asking me to be an advisor, a confidant. He was asking me to be myself. And in that moment, I realized the true depth of his acceptance. He didn't want to change me. He wanted to understand me, to utilize my perceived weakness as a strength. My heart, once a lonely, guarded place, began to bloom, unfurling its petals in the warmth of his gaze. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, each one deepening my understanding of Kalen and my place within his formidable castle. I spent hours in his study, observing, listening, and communicating through my tablet. He would discuss matters of state, the intricate politics of his kingdom, the challenges he faced. I would listen, absorbing every detail, every nuance, my silent observations often surprising him with their depth and clarity. I pointed out inconsistencies in reports, sensed underlying tensions between advisors, and offered solutions that were often simple, yet profound. My voicelessness, which had once been a barrier, became a tool. Without the need to formulate words, my mind was free to process, to analyze, to truly see. Kalen valued my input, often seeking my counsel before making critical decisions. He treated me as an equal, a trusted advisor, and slowly, the whispers of the castle staff began to change. From curiosity and disdain, their gazes shifted to respect, even admiration. They saw how the king valued me, how he listened to my silent insights. My relationship with Kalen deepened, evolving beyond that of king and advisor. We spent evenings together in the private sitting room, reading, or simply existing in comfortable silence. He would read aloud from ancient texts, his rich voice filling the room, and I would follow along, my fingers tracing the words. He taught me about his ancestors, about the history of his kingdom, about the delicate balance of power he maintained. I, in turn, communicated my own thoughts, my observations of nature, my childhood memories, through the wooden tablet. He learned about the girl behind the silence, the girl who loved the quiet beauty of a blooming garden, the girl who possessed a fierce loyalty and an unwavering spirit. One evening, as the fire crackled softly in the hearth, he spoke of his own past. His voice was low, tinged with a melancholy I hadn't heard before. He spoke of betrayal, of a mate who had chosen power over love, leaving him with a deep scar of distrust. It was a raw, vulnerable confession, a testament to the depth of trust he now placed in me. My heart ached for him, for the pain he had carried for so long. I reached out, my hand gently covering his on the armrest of his chair. He looked at me, his golden eyes filled with a raw emotion, and for a long moment, we simply looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between us. His past mirrored my own in a way, both of us carrying the wounds of rejection, the scars of being misunderstood. But with each passing day, those wounds began to heal, replaced by a growing connection, a shared solace. The castle, once a daunting fortress, now felt like home. The servants, initially wary, had become familiar, even friendly. I formed a particular bond with Alara, a young beta maid who possessed a cheerful spirit and a surprising understanding of my silent language. She would often seek me out, sharing gossip of the castle, her bright eyes conveying a warmth that melted away my lingering shyness. I even found a small, neglected courtyard in the castle grounds, a forgotten space where a few hardy rose bushes still clung to life. I began to tend them, my fingers finding the familiar rhythm of pruning and caring. The vibrant blooms, a splash of color against the ancient stone, became my personal sanctuary, a quiet corner of beauty in a world of power and politics. My world had expanded, my life enriched in ways I could never have imagined. I was no longer an outcast, but a valued member of the king's court, a confidant, a friend. And with Kalen, I felt a connection that transcended words, a bond forged in shared silences and unspoken understandings. His presence was a constant comfort, his golden eyes a beacon of acceptance. The deep melancholy that had once been my constant companion began to recede, replaced by a quiet joy, a sense of belonging. Yet, a shadow lingered. The political unrest Kalen had spoken of began to escalate. Whispers of rebellion grew louder, fueled by a powerful Alpha Lord named Valerius, a man known for his ambition and his ruthless tactics. He was a charismatic leader, drawing disgruntled packs to his banner, promising them greater power, greater freedom from Kalen's rule. Kalen spent long hours in council, his face etched with worry. I observed, my silent presence a steadying force in the tense meetings. I saw the fear in the eyes of his advisors, the growing concern. Valerius's influence was spreading, threatening to plunge the kingdom into civil war. One evening, Kalen found me in the rose garden, my hands stained with earth. He sat beside me on a stone bench, his gaze troubled. "Valerius grows bolder," he confessed, his voice low. "He claims my rule is too rigid, too unyielding. He seeks to undermine my authority, to divide the kingdom." I looked at him, my heart heavy. I reached for my tablet, etching a single question: what does he truly want? Kalen sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Power, Alara. Absolute power. He believes my gentleness, as he calls it, makes me weak. He believes my acceptance of your silence is a sign of my inability to lead." A cold dread settled in my stomach. My presence, my acceptance, was being used against Kalen. I was a perceived weakness, a symbol of his supposed softness. He noticed the shift in my demeanor, the sudden tension in my shoulders. He reached out, his hand covering mine, his touch warm and reassuring. "No, Alara," he said, his voice firm. "Your presence is my strength. Your silence, your wisdom, reminds me of what truly matters. It grounds me." His words were a balm, easing the sting of my fear. He saw my worth, even when others sought to diminish it. But I knew with a chilling certainty that Valerius would use anything, any perceived weakness, to achieve his goals. And I, the silent Omega, was a potent weapon in his arsenal of accusations. The looming threat of rebellion cast a long shadow over the castle, a constant reminder that our fragile peace was on the brink of shattering. The tension in the castle became palpable. Valerius's provocations grew bolder, his rhetoric sharper. He openly challenged Kalen's authority, questioning his judgment, his strength, and even his fitness to rule. He spread rumors, twisted truths, and painted Kalen as a soft, indecisive ruler, swayed by a voiceless Omega. The whispers, once confined to the shadows, now echoed through the halls, reaching my ears even in my quiet sanctuary. I felt the weight of it, the responsibility. My presence, which Kalen saw as a strength, was perceived by many as a weakness, a testament to his supposed unsuitability for kingship. My mother's words, "A silent Omega is a useless Omega," resonated with a chilling clarity. Was I truly a burden, an unwitting pawn in Valerius's game? Kalen, however, remained steadfast. He refused to be provoked into rash action, his patience and wisdom a stark contrast to Valerius's fiery aggression. He continued to seek my counsel, to value my silent insights, unwavering in his belief in my worth. He saw beyond the surface, beyond the prejudices of his court, and that unwavering faith became my anchor. One morning, as I tended my roses, a small orphaned boy named Finn, who had recently been brought into the castle's care, approached me. He was a shy child, no older than 5, with wide, trusting eyes. He held out a single wilting wildflower, his small hand trembling. I knelt, taking the flower gently, and smiled. He smiled back, a shy, hopeful expression, and then, to my surprise, he spoke. "You're not scary," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The others say you're strange because you don't talk, but you're nice." My heart melted. He saw me, not as a defect, but as a kind, gentle soul. It was a profound moment, a reminder that innocence often saw past the superficial. His words, though simple, were a powerful affirmation. He was a small, fragile spark of hope in the escalating darkness. Valerius, growing impatient, finally issued an open challenge, a council of alphas, to be held in the Grand Hall, where he would formally present his grievances against Kalen and demand a vote of no confidence. It was a bold move, a direct assault on Kalen's authority, and it sent a ripple of fear through the entire kingdom. Kalen accepted the challenge, his face grim but resolute. He knew the stakes were high. His reign, and perhaps even his life, hung in the balance. As the day of the council approached, the castle was a hive of nervous activity. Alphas from various packs began to arrive, their imposing presences filling the halls. The air crackled with tension, with unspoken allegiances and simmering resentments. I remained by Kalen's side, a silent, unwavering presence. He often reached for my hand, a silent reassurance, a shared strength. He would look at me, his golden eyes conveying a silent plea, a quiet trust. In those moments, I felt a fierce protectiveness bloom within me, a maternal instinct to shield him from the storm. He had given me a voice, even in my silence, and I would not let him fall. I would stand by him, a silent sentinel, a testament to his unwavering belief in the worth of every soul, regardless of their perceived flaws. My silence, once a source of shame, now felt like a wellspring of inner strength, a quiet power that I was finally ready to unleash. The day of the great council dawned, a heavy, oppressive gray. The grand hall, usually a place of celebration, was now a somber arena, filled with the imposing figures of alphas from every corner of the kingdom. Their faces were stern, their gazes sharp, assessing. The air thrummed with a raw, untamed power, a clash of wills and ambitions. Kalen, dressed in simple, unadorned robes, entered the hall with a quiet dignity, his head held high. I walked beside him, a silent anchor in the swirling currents of power. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my steps were steady. I met the gazes of the assembled alphas, not with defiance, but with a quiet resolve. Valerius, resplendent in robes of deep crimson, stood at the opposite end of the hall, surrounded by his loyalists. His smile was a predatory sneer, his eyes gleaming with a triumphant malice. He reveled in the drama, in the spectacle of his challenge. The proceedings began, a series of accusations and defenses. Valerius spoke first, his voice booming through the hall, a charismatic performance designed to sway the undecided. He painted Kalen as weak, indecisive, and unfit to rule. He cited my presence, my voicelessness, as a prime example of Kalen's softness, his deviation from alpha tradition. "He keeps a silent Omega by his side," Valerius roared, his gaze sweeping over the alphas, a symbol of weakness, a testament to his inability to lead with strength. How can a king lead his pack when he cannot even command a simple Omega to speak? A murmur rippled through the hall, a mixture of agreement and uncertainty. Kalen's supporters shifted uneasily, their faces etched with concern. My heart sank, a cold dread washing over me. His words were a poisoned arrow, aimed not just at Kalen, but at me, at my very existence. He was using my perceived flaw, my silence, to undermine the king. Kalen, however, remained calm, his expression unwavering. He listened to Valerius's tirade with a quiet patience, his golden eyes occasionally meeting mine, a silent reassurance. When it was Kalen's turn to speak, his voice was low, yet it carried an authority that silenced the hall. "Valerius speaks of weakness," Kalen began, his gaze sweeping over the assembled alphas. "He speaks of tradition, but tradition, without wisdom, is merely stagnation, and strength, without compassion, is merely brutality." He paused, his gaze settling on me. "My Omega, Alara, has no voice in the traditional sense, but her silence, as I have learned, speaks louder than any words." He turned back to the alphas, his voice rising, imbued with a fierce conviction. "She sees truths that others, blinded by their own voices, cannot. She observes with a clarity unburdened by ego or ambition. Her wisdom, her quiet strength, has guided me, strengthened me. And in her, I see the true heart of this kingdom: resilience, compassion, and an unwavering spirit. He then turned to Valerius, his golden eyes blazing with a righteous anger. Valerius sees only weakness where there is strength. He seeks to divide us, to sow discord, to exploit fear for his own selfish gain. He does not understand true leadership, which lies not in brute force, but in wisdom, in empathy, in the ability to see the worth in every soul, even the one society dismisses. Valerius scoffed, but a tremor of unease ran through his supporters. Kalen's words had struck a chord, challenging their ingrained prejudices, forcing them to reconsider their perceptions. Then, Kalen did something unexpected. He walked towards me, his gaze never leaving mine. He took my hand, his touch warm and firm, and led me to the center of the hall, before all the assembled alphas. I stand here today, not just as your king, but as a man who has learned the true meaning of strength from the most unlikely of teachers, he declared, his voice ringing with conviction. I ask you, alphas, to look beyond the superficial, beyond the assumptions. Look into her eyes. Tell me what you see. The alphas stared at me, their initial surprise giving way to a grudging curiosity. My heart pounded, but I met their gazes, unflinching. I was no longer the frightened, silent Omega. I was a woman, standing beside her king, her silent presence a testament to his unwavering faith. In that moment, I felt a surge of courage, a powerful, unspoken truth rising within me. My silence was not an absence, but a presence, a deep, resonant power that Valerius, in his blindness, could never comprehend. The hall was utterly silent, every eye fixed on me. I felt the weight of their scrutiny, the generations of prejudice, the ingrained belief that an Omega, especially a voiceless one, was nothing more than a burden. But Kalen's hand, warm and firm in mine, was a constant reminder of his faith. His gaze, filled with unwavering trust, gave me strength. I looked at the assembled alphas, their faces a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and a few, even, a flicker of grudging respect. I saw their doubts, their preconceived notions, but I also saw a crack in their armor, a nascent willingness to question their own beliefs. Then I turned my gaze to Valerius. His face was contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He had expected me to shrink, to cower, to confirm his accusations of Kalen's weakness, but I did not. My silence in that moment was not submission, but a fierce, unyielding defiance, a power that words could never convey. My internal monologue, a torrent of emotion, solidified into a single, resolute thought. He will not break him. He will not break us. Kalen squeezed my hand, a silent signal. He knew. He understood. He had given me a voice, not through sound, but through acceptance, through trust. And now I would use that voice, in the only way I knew how. I released Kalen's hand, a deliberate, powerful movement that drew every eye. I walked forward, a single step, then another, until I stood directly before Valerius. He scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. What is this, King Kalen? A silent spectacle? A mute display of your dwindling power? His words were meant to wound, to diminish, but they fell flat, echoing, emptily in the charged silence. I reached into the folds of my gown and pulled out the small wooden tablet Kalen had given me, the one I had etched with hope so many months ago. My fingers, trembling slightly, began to move, etching words onto the smooth surface. Every eye in the hall was on me, a breathless anticipation hanging in the air. I wrote slowly, deliberately, each stroke of the stylus a testament to my unwavering resolve. When I was finished, I held up the tablet, turning it so that Valerius and all the alphas could read my silent message. The words, clear and stark, were etched for all to see. A king's strength is not in his roar, but in his heart. You see only silence. He hears truth. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Valerius's face, once sneering, now contorted in a mask of shock and fury. He had expected nothing, and I had given him everything. I had given him a truth he could not deny, a silent power he could not comprehend. Kalen stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder, his golden eyes blazing with pride. "She speaks of truth," he declared, his voice ringing through the hall. "She speaks of a truth that many of you, blinded by tradition and ambition, have forgotten." He turned to the assembled alphas, his gaze unwavering. "Valerius offers you power, but at what cost? He offers you division, chaos, a return to an age of brutality. I offer you unity, peace, and a future built on understanding and compassion. I offer you a kingdom where every voice, even the silent ones, is heard and valued." The alphas exchanged glances, their faces thoughtful. The tide was turning. My silent message, amplified by Kalen's powerful words, had struck a deep chord. They saw the contrast between Valerius's empty promises and Kalen's unwavering integrity, between the brute force of ambition and the quiet strength of true leadership. Valerius, defeated, could only stand there, his face a mask of impotent rage. His challenge had failed, his ambition had been exposed, not by a grand speech, but by the silent, undeniable truth of an Omega. Kalen had won, not through force, but through faith, through acceptance. And I, the voiceless Omega, had found my voice, not in sound, but in the unwavering conviction of my heart. The Great Council concluded with a resounding affirmation of Kalen's rule. Valerius, his ambition shattered and his support withered, was stripped of his titles and exiled from the kingdom, his threats now empty echoes. The Alphas, humbled by Kalen's wisdom and my silent defiance, pledged their renewed loyalty, their respect now genuine and deeply earned. The castle, once a place of tension and whispers, now hummed with a renewed sense of purpose, of unity. In the days that followed, the weight of the past began to lift from my shoulders. The pity in people's eyes was replaced by respect, the disdain by admiration. I was no longer just the voiceless Omega. I was Ilara, the king's trusted confidant, the i.e. woman whose silence spoke volumes. My small garden in the castle courtyard flourished, its vibrant blooms a testament to the new life that had taken root within me. Finn, the little boy who had first seen my kindness, became my constant companion, his shy smiles and quiet presence a balm to my soul. He would often sit beside me in the garden, sharing his small observations, his innocent chatter a welcome sound in my world. Kalen and I spent more time together than ever, our bond deepening with each passing day. Our silent communication, once a necessity, had evolved into a beautiful, intricate dance of understanding. We knew each other's thoughts, each other's feelings, with a depth that transcended words. One evening, as we sat by the fire in our private sitting room, Kalen turned to me, his golden eyes filled with a profound tenderness. He reached out, taking my hand in his touch sending a familiar warmth through me. "Ilara," he began, his voice a low, resonant murmur. "You have brought light into my life, truth into my reign. You have shown me that true strength lies not in the loudest voice, but in the purest heart." My heart pounded, a joyous drum against my ribs. I looked at him, my eyes filled with an unspoken love, a deep, unwavering devotion. He continued, his gaze unwavering, his voice filled with a powerful emotion that made my breath catch. "I came to your village seeking order, seeking strength. I found a silence that spoke of a spirit untamed, a heart unburdened by the world's noise. I found you, Ilara, and in you, I found my true self. He knelt before me, a king kneeling before his Omega, his eyes burning with an intense, unyielding love. Ilara, my silent truth, my heart's song, will you be my queen? Will you stand by my side, not just as my confidant, but as my mate, my equal, my soul's companion? Tears welled in my eyes, a silent cascade of joy and overwhelming love. This was the moment I had never dared to dream of, the acceptance, the love I had always yearned for. I reached for my tablet, my fingers trembling with emotion, and etched a single powerful word: always. Kalen smiled, a radiant, breathtaking smile that lit up his entire face. He rose, pulling me gently into his arms, holding me close. His scent, the familiar aroma of pine and ancient earth, enveloped me, a comforting embrace of love and belonging. In his arms, I felt whole, complete, utterly cherished. My silence, once a cage, was now a sanctuary, a sacred space where our love bloomed, vibrant and true. I was no longer the voiceless Omega, the burden, the defect. I was Ilara, queen of the Alphas, a woman whose silence had spoken volumes, whose heart had found its voice in the unwavering love of her king. Our love story, etched in silence and forged in unwavering faith, was a testament to the profound truth that sometimes the loudest messages are spoken without a single sound. The wedding was a celebration unlike any the kingdom had ever seen. It was not a grand display of pomp and circumstance, but a heartfelt gathering of Pax, united in their respect for Kalen and their awe of the silent queen who had captured his heart. The castle grounds were adorned with wildflowers, their vibrant colors reflecting the joy that permeated the air. Finn, my little companion, walked beside me, holding a small bouquet of roses from my garden, his face alight with wonder. Kalen waited for me at the altar, his golden eyes shining with an emotion that made my heart ache with love. He wore a simple, elegant tunic, his powerful presence softened by the genuine tenderness in his gaze. As I approached, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. They watched, not with curiosity, but with a palpable sense of anticipation, a shared understanding of the profound love that bound us. Kalen took my hands, his touch warm and reassuring. He looked into my eyes, and in that moment, the world outside faded away. There was only us, our souls entwined in a silent symphony of love. Ilara, he began, his voice a low, reverent murmur. My beloved queen, today I pledge my life, my heart, my kingdom to you. I promise to cherish your silence, to honor your wisdom, and to always be the voice that carries your truth to the world. I promise to love you, fiercely and without reservation, for all of my days. My tears flowed freely, tears of joy, of gratitude, of a love so profound it defied words. I reached for my tablet, my hand steady now, filled with a quiet strength. I etched my vow, a promise from the deepest part of my soul. My king, my love, my Kalen. My silence is yours, my heart is yours. I pledge my unwavering love, my eternal loyalty, my very being to you, always, forever. I held the tablet up, and Kalen, his eyes now also glistening with unshed tears, read my silent vow. He then leaned down, and in a gesture that sent a ripple of emotion through the entire assembly, he kissed me. It was a kiss of profound tenderness, of deep passion, a silent promise of a lifetime of shared love. The crowd erupted in cheers, a joyous cacophony that celebrated not just a union, but a triumph of love over prejudice, of acceptance over fear. Life as queen was a journey of continuous discovery, a tapestry woven with threads of love, responsibility, and unwavering support. I found my place, not just by Kalen's side, but as an integral part of the kingdom. My silent counsel continued to be invaluable, my unique perspective often shedding light on complex issues that others, caught in the web of words and politics, overlooked. I worked alongside Kaylin, attending councils, meeting with pack leaders, and offering my insights through my tablet. My presence, once a point of contention, became a source of strength for the kingdom, a symbol of Kaelin's enlightened rule. He often said that my silence taught him to listen more deeply, not just to words, but to the unspoken needs and fears of his people. Our evenings were spent in quiet, companionship, reading, sharing stories through my tablet, or simply existing in the comfortable intimacy of our shared silence. Kalen often read to me, his rich voice a soothing balm, his choice of stories always reflecting a hidden message, a shared understanding. He would tell me tales of ancient heroes, of powerful queens, and of love that defied all odds. I, in turn, would share my observations of the castle, my thoughts on the people, my dreams for the future, all etched onto my trusty wooden tablet. Our love deepened with each passing day, a silent, powerful force that bound us together. We communicated not just through the tablet, but through glances, through touches, through the subtle language of our bodies. He knew when I was troubled, when I was happy, when I needed solace, and I, in turn, understood his burdens, his joys, his deepest desires. Finn, the little boy who had first seen my kindness, continued to be a bright spot in our lives. He blossomed under the castle's care, often seeking me out in the garden, sharing his drawings and his innocent chatter. He became a symbol of the new era in the kingdom, an era of acceptance and compassion. Our kingdom flourished under Kaelin's rule, guided by wisdom and empathy. The unity he had envisioned, the peace he had fought for, became a reality. And I, the voiceless Omega, stood proudly by his side, my silence a testament to the power of a love that transcends all barriers, a love that had given me not just a voice, but a crown. Our story became a legend, whispered through the generations, a reminder that true strength is found not in the loudest roar, but in the purest heart, and that sometimes the most profound truths are spoken in the deepest silence. My life, once a shadow, was now a beacon, a testament to the transformative power of genuine connection, of being seen, truly seen, for who you are, not for what you lack. And in Kaelin's arms, I found my forever, my everything, my silent, soaring song.